think I read somewhere before that you were born and raised in Nebraska. Is that right?
I was,
And
indeed.
then you took this mission trip to Korea.
Yep.
One thing that always fascinates me is kind of how place affects people and then comes out in their writing. How do you feel like after being raised in Nebraska, then going to Korea for 2 years? How did that affect your maybe how you saw the world and how it eventually
Yeah.
seeped into your writing?
Well, I will say, going from being in a state that is 95% Caucasian
Right.
to being the minority was really interesting. Now, it's not that I was a privileged minority, right? So it's a different sort of thing than growing up as a minority in the United States by far.
Right.
But going and being where everybody turns and looks at you, that you are the outsider, and learning a new culture, learning to be part of it and respect it, and learning a new language, and being immersed in all that stuff. Wow, was that very useful. So useful as a writer writing fantasy novels. The Korean language still seeps into basically every fantasy language I create, right? I'd learned French when I was in high school, but the French kind of all went out the window when I lived for 2 years in another country. And once in a while, the French rears its head, but mostly Korean is what's influencing how I create languages. So that's certainly really cool and a big part of it. But also, what I was doing. My first published novel, Elantris, I actually came up with the idea while I was serving as a missionary, because the main antagonist in Elantris is an evil missionary, which is really fun to me. I'm like, as I'm a missionary, I saw things like one of the things that was really influential in how I perceived the world is I was out there as a Mormon missionary. My job was to teach people about the Mormon Church, which, teach people about Christ and all of that stuff, which I believe in. But at one point I was walking through a subway and there was this Buddhist monk. And what the Buddhist monks will do is they're forbidden from earning money. That's required by, at least in this sect of Buddhism, that they beg for their money in order to keep them humble. It's actually kind of a really cool thing. And the Buddhist monk was kneeling on the ground, very humbly, banging quietly on a drum and chanting, as they do, in order to beg for the money to go buy their food. And next to them was a Christian from a different denomination missionary holding up a big sign that said Buddhism is hell. And I saw that and I'm like,
Oh, the
there's
absurdity.
got to be a way where I can teach people about what I believe and share that with them that doesn't involve holding a sign up saying Buddhism is hell next to this humble, nice man, following the precepts of his religion, right? And that became the core my philosophy on that sort of thing is I can't ever be that guy. And when I came home, I'm like, I'm going to write a story about that guy, right? I'm going to write a story about the missionary who's out to do things for the wrong reason. It's not really that guy. In Elantris, the idea is the missionary's been told if he doesn't convert the people of the city, then the armies are just going to destroy them. So in his mind, he's saving their lives by trying to convert them. But he's using all the wrong methods and things like this. And so you see the stuff that I experience really popping out in the fiction. And so, yeah, you mentioned location. I'm actually going to take that a different direction.
Okay.
Growing up in Nebraska, which is very green, breadbasket, very humid in the summers, very wet in the winters with lots of snow, and then coming to Utah. So I came out to go to BYU, which if you're Mormon, BYU is like in-state tuition. You can pay like $1,500 a semester or something,
Nice.
which is like awesome when you're a Nebraska kid and you don't really want to go to UNL. UNL has some great programs, but it wasn't for me. So not having a lot of money, being able to come out here to a top-tier private school was awesome. So I come out to Utah, and my roommate is a photography major, and he loves landscapes. And so he took me. I don't know if you've ever been to southern Utah.
I haven't.
But southern Utah has these gorgeous, gorgeous canyons and rock formations, and really weird things like the Goblin Valley, where they filmed part of Galaxy Quest, where all the rock monsters are. That's a real place. And these canyons where you go down and you're in this darkness with this strip of light high above you, and seeing the strata of the earth from things like the wave or going to Delicate Arch and whatnot. And that became what inspired the Stormlight Archive, which is one of my big epic fantasy series, is this world of stone and water and storms and no soil, just lots and lots of rock. Totally influenced directly by going on these camera trips, which we do like twice a year. And I was the lovely assistant. I would hold the camera equipment and hold up the little thing that would bounce the light the direction he wanted it and stuff like that. And I credit that as inspiring an entire book series.
That's amazing. So many questions just came to me right then. But so this is something that also when you mentioned the monk or the missionary who was picking on the monk and then inspired you to write a book that was a little of the reverse of that in Elantris. Because you are a person of faith and that your faith does play an active and vital role in your life, are you ever, when you look at the things that you write, do you ever take a step back and say, okay, now I'm bleeding a little too much into the story here, if you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like how do you?
I do.
I guess what my question is how do you? We've all read fiction that is just so heavy-handed, and we're like, okay, we know exactly everything that the writer believes and what they're trying to get across in the story. Your writing does not come across that way. How do you? How are you careful to leave the story engaging and while still saying what you want to say?
So I belong to a school of thought with fiction that can be easily described, but kind of doing it too easily. I can't remember how you say that, but so Tolkien and C.S. Lewis had this differing in philosophies.
Right.
C.S. Lewis, if you read his books, are very didactic.
Right.
I happen to really enjoy reading them, but he wears his influences on his sleeve and his morals on his sleeve. Tolkien had a contrasting opinion. He thought you tell a story that's a powerful story that you're interested in, and you let theme kind of bubble up as you write, and I fall more into that camp. I feel that my job is to be a storyteller, and part of that job is to represent the world faithfully. And so kind of my big mandate is I hate it when there's like one character who believes a little bit like I do or is a theist or a Christian or whatever, and they're just an idiot who exists to be told how stupid they are.
Right.
And so I've felt that. And so when I go to my writing, I say, well, there's a few things I want to do. The first one is I want to make sure that there are sympathetic characters with good arguments on all sides of an issue that I'm going to deal with in a book. Because if I do that, that's how the real world is, right?
Right.
There are people, we don't want to admit it for some reason in political discourse, but there are people on the other side of every issue who are smart, who make good decisions, who have really thought through what they're doing. They're not just like blind obedience. In every spectrum that you can find, you will find somebody like that. And they're thoughtful, sympathetic people who happen to believe very differently from you. And if I write a book that doesn't capture that, I think I'm failing in kind of one of my most fundamental moral obligations as a writer, which is to present the world in an accurate way, which is weird to say when I write epic fantasy about wizards. But this is how I view kind of the mandate of the storyteller. And so I avoid tokenism. That's a big thing. If you're going to have everybody believe one way and one person believe the other way, then you're going to really stray into tokenism. If you have one person represent a culture, one person represent an ideal, one person represent a place on the gender spectrum, whatever it is, if you only have one person, then you're going to lapse into stereotyping as a writer. And if you can make yourself stretch further than that, then you will naturally be forced to make these people, hopefully if you're writing right, to be all interesting and different people, and people who might agree politically might disagree in a different way, so that everybody is an individual. And I just think that makes better stories, right?
Absolutely.
I try to be extra, because I know my own bias is going to push a certain direction. I try to be a little extra vigilant on people who have a contrasting opinion to me. Yasna, who's an atheist in the Stormlight Archive, is an example of this, where I'm like, I really need to get in the head of people who are atheists and present her in a way that when they read the book, they say, yes, that is what I would say in this position. And so I have to kind of be a little extra sensitive and careful, is what I feel. So I spent a lot of time on forums where people who disagree with me are talking. I lurk on them, and I'm like, all right, what are the atheists saying here? How does it feel? Can I find the way that someone feels in a situation like this so they can express it, so Yasna can express accurately how someone would feel in this situation? And then I try to avoid tokenism, so that she's not the only atheist in the world, right? In that same book, Khaled is an agnostic, and we've got different people on different sides of the various issues. You've got Taravangian, who's an antagonist, who's an atheist, and then you have someone like Dalinar, who's kind of pushing toward a religious revolution and things like this. And so you've got a Martin Luther character or something like this. And so you just kind of have different people who are on different sides of a lot of different issues that you like or sympathize with, and you're going to do okay. That's at least what I feel.
Beautiful.